14th regular meeting of the Santa Rosa City Council. Ms. Gomez, would you call the roll, please?
Let the record show that all council members are present.
Thank you. And Ms. Gallagher, report on closed session, please.
On items 2.1 and 2.2, the council gave direction to their labor negotiators. And on items 2.3 and 2.4, council gave direction to staff. I was not present during the item 2.5.
Thank you. We have no proclamations or presentations. Mr. City Manager, do you have a report?
Yes, I do. I'm going to, bear with me, I'm going to go through some updated data that we have about the progress we're making on the recovery, including the debris effort and the compromised storm drain infrastructure, including a video to show the council that was posted today about the work that's taking place in that area. So I'll start with debris removal update. Santa Rosa has removed 80 burned vehicles from the city right of way as of this evening. Countywide, EPA has cleared hazardous waste from 5,160 properties. At least 50 sites have already been cleared of debris by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and are awaiting test results, and an additional 60 properties are in progress as of this evening. As of 7 p.m. last night, a total of 4,397 ROEs have been submitted for the Sonoma County Consolidated Debris Removal Program. This total speaks to the comprehensive outreach effort initiated to inform the public. This included direct mail information, radio PSAs, television PSAs, robocall messages, Nixle alerts, next door posts, radio and TV interviews, ongoing Twitter and Facebook posts by city and county channels, a video series, 41 community meetings by city, county employees and representatives from Cal OES, FEMA, Army Corps, US EPA. Those meetings included large town halls, debris resource fairs, and small targeted neighborhood meetings.
Can you share that number one more time?
which I read a lot.
The 4,100.
So as of 7 p.m. last night, a total of 4,397 ROEs were submitted. And onto the storm drain infrastructure. This is as of this morning. 23 current known destroyed underground storm drain infrastructure areas were under analysis. 71% of the Fountain Grove infrastructure assessment has been completed. Crews are due back to the emergency operations, including myself, at 5 p.m. this evening with another update. Staff are continuing to monitor known areas of destruction and keeping a close eye on the weather. The National Weather Service has issued a flash flood watch for Wednesday afternoon beginning at 4 p.m. and lasting until 3 a.m. Thursday, with increased threat of flow debris, mudslides, and flash flooding. Rain amounts are forecasted to be 1 to 2 inches in the valleys and 2 to 3 inches in the hills and mountain areas. We are asking our staff, our residents to be prepared and informed. City staff went door to door in Fountain Grove on Sunday to notice a total of 1,176 occupied residencies in 56 businesses. They provided information, included an update on the current stormwater infrastructure assessments, the potential risks due to forecasted rain, and guidance on what residents can do to be prepared should conditions change. A press conference was held on Sunday, November 12th at 1 p.m. to provide information on the situation and alert residents to be prepared in case forecasted rains greater in case of forecasted rains, create greater risks in that particular area of the city. Information regarding updates on the Fountain Grove storm drain infrastructure assessment, including a frequently updated map, is available at SonomaCountyRecovers.org. We've been working in partnership with Cali OES and have produced a video that was published this afternoon showing the assessment work currently happening in Fountain Grove. The video is on the recovery website and has been posted to the City of Santa Rosa's Facebook page and through the Nextdoor network. And I'm going to show that video to you now. Maybe. Just hit play. Or maybe not. So, of course, when we try to use technology, we get an error. But I would encourage you to go to the city's Facebook page, and it is a first-hand look at how we're using CCTV equipment to analyze the storm drains and shows some of the damage that the teams have been encountering out in the field. We'll try one more time, and then we'll move on with the agenda. Okay, we're stuck in a loop, so we'll move forward. Thank you very much.
Mr. City Manager, could you share with us electronically the information that you verbally shared?
Absolutely.
That'd be great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGlynn. Ms. Gallagher, do you have a city attorney report?
Nothing to report today.
Thank you. Mr. McGlynn, given that you need to be at another meeting due to the ongoing emergency in a short time, I'm going to ask that we rearrange the agenda and you present us with item 14.1 at this point, because I'd like to hear from you about the need and the use of these funds.
Certainly. Item 14.1, report. Cancellation of Service Hub project and reallocation of those funds to a disaster recovery project. Deborah Lochner, Chief Financial Officer, presenting.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. Back in March 2015, the Council appropriated $2.5 million for the city to set up a central service center for residents and business owners to do business with the city. The Service Hub project proved costlier than anticipated, and we have not proceeded with that project since we got the assessment from the architect that told us what we needed to do to the building to be able to use it as envisioned. So we are proposing that we close that Service Hub project. There's about $2.3 million remaining in the project, and move those funds to a new disaster recovery project. This will allow us more flexibility as we move forward to put some contracts in place and to get the assistance that the city continues to need in the recovery efforts. So the recommendation is recommended by the city manager and the finance department that the city council by motion approve closing the city service center or hub project and move those remaining funds to a new project for disaster recovery efforts to be managed by the city manager. And with that, we'll answer any questions.
Council, are there questions on this item? Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that the number one question is just a fundamental question about what is the disaster recovery project that these funds are being proposed to go to.
So that is to marshal our efforts on the recovery side. I would say part of the challenge is we're learning as we go through this process, and that's exactly what the funding is to be able to support, being able to rapidly address emerging situations, and be a funding source to support ongoing activities. And one of those activities you're going to entertain next week which is bringing more resources into our planning front desk to meet the need that we know is coming and has already arrived around plan submissions as folks try to think about their next steps in the recovery process. So we're going to be bringing a formal proposal forward. We need to be able to advance funding against that, but there are other contractual issues that are likely to arise in the immediate term, and we need a resource to be able to address those concerns. So I know that doesn't give you a soup to nuts conversation, but we're learning as we go through this process. But we need to set up an operation, and we need to have a funding source appropriated to address those needs. Some of those we hope will be reimbursable. Some of them may be cost recovery models, but in point of fact, we're going to have to go through a process to make sure we're testing ourselves to FEMA standards, to get as much of that money returned as we possibly can. So that may not give you specifics, but our intent is to update you as we're mobilizing around this Recovery Operations Center, which you're going to learn more about next week. This was really, and actually it was you, council member, who asked us to start looking at projects that were sitting in abeyance and identify what could be immediately moved and activated toward the recovery effort. And this is part of that process to build that into our operations and advance funding to address those needs.
And I appreciate that. And just as a point of clarification, the $2.3 million, then, if I'm understanding you correctly, would not be spent without coming to the Council for Policy Direction, correct?
It would be, I mean, again, I have authority under my current city manager authority to issue contracts up to $100,000. But again, that's part of the reason we're bringing back a comprehensive plan next week, looking for your approval on expanding our ability to address the community needs through our Planning and Economic Development Department.
Correct. So I guess another way to ask the question is, we're not signing off on a $2.3 million blank check that the public and that the council will not have an opportunity to weigh in on direction for.
You're correct.
Thank you. One last question. $2.5 million was allocated, $2.3 million is left. Where did the $200,000 go?
So it's actually slightly more than that because there was some funding already from the Building Acquisition Fund. We spent a little under, I believe it's maybe a little over $500,000 in total. Most of that was spent on architectural work to determine how we could meet ADA standards and all the various things you need to bring the building up to code. When we did that and got a bid for what the construction costs were going to be, we pretty much stopped the project at that point in time because we did not have sufficient resources to make the building what we envisioned.
So perhaps in the future, when we review buildings like this, maybe we can get a package deal so it's not as expensive to review one building.
Well, and I think that is one of the things that we're going to be bringing forward in future conversations with council about this entire campus. And for example, there are costs associated with this campus that are going to be very, very expensive for us to manage into the future. And part of our plan before October 8th was actually to engage council in the conversation and start to talk about this campus, how this campus was originally assembled, and the challenges the campus has as it relates to things like ADA requirements that are necessary for improvement if we continue to occupy the campus.
I think that's great, and I think it's a great conversation. I just am pointing out that hopefully it doesn't cost us $200,000 per building to review them and then choose not to move forward.
Understood.
Other questions on this? Ms. Combs?
Thank you. I certainly see the need to do this in an emergency, but I have some questions about how we got where we are today. My recollection is we had a meeting in which we already decided not to move forward with the service hub. So I'm trying to understand why the dollars weren't originally reserved to the general fund when we closed the item.
We actually did not officially close the item, council member, so I had individual conversations with council members saying that that was the likely course, but we have not. That's part of the reason we're doing this is for transparency purposes, we're bringing back this program to close it out, but we have officially taken no action to close the project.
Okay, I thought we had actually taken an action to stop going down that road and just was trying to figure out why this hadn't gone into our unfunded reserve already. So I appreciate you bringing it back to us. And I heard you say that 100,000 is the amount that we have allocated to the city manager to go forward without our approvals. Is that
that's
necessary?
The threshold that
Right.
the city manager has to execute contracts is
Okay. It really concerns me to do this without a specific list, and I'm wondering why you chose to bring it forward this week when you'll be coming back next week with the specific list.
Again, there may be other immediate needs to meet. We had been planning to bring the other conversation forward concurrently with this request, but operational needs meted that we had to delay that particular process another week. So it was supposed to be syncopated, and we've had other issues that have delayed that project being brought forward, but it will be brought forward next week.
My understanding is that we have a significant reserve fund, and I'm interested that in an emergency, we aren't looking at the reserve fund until we can have the list come back. Is there a reason why we're doing it this way instead of using reserves that were designed to be there for a rainy day, which I guess we had the opposite of a rainy day?
So I would say that we have used our reserves. All our response to date has been reserves funded. We have not appropriated those funds. We've just overspent our budget. We will be coming back at a future date. I'm not sure we can do it in the January mid-year timeframe, but as soon as we know the impacts to the departments and maybe have a sense of what revenue might come in to support those back from FEMA, we'll be coming back with a better report to the council on that. But we've already spent a good portion of the unassigned fund balance.
Thank you. That clarifies why we're now making this step. Where will the service hub go if it's not there?
You mean the old project?
The project of having, a service hub was a great idea when it started.
So again,
I'm not completely giving this idea up. I understand it might be delayed.
And I don't think staff is either. I think again, one of what we had been on a trajectory to do was get into a conversation with council about this entire footprint, trying to realize how we could move our modeling towards that service hub model. The fact is that part of the reason when we had executed some of the drawings is we believed we could meet that still within that footprint and that budget. When we got back some of the estimates and some of the ADA issues, which I know council is intimately familiar with, that we wrestled with a couple of years ago, we had to change our processes to address ADA issues more ongoing, and that's one of the things that we've done a recent assessment on this campus. But we intend to bring back that concept. It may not, again, it may not be appropriate to that facility space, but we want to revisit that with the council. This might not be the opportune time to that, but we're not setting that idea aside permanently.
I'm not actually willing to push that. This is my last question. Between now and next week, what are the items that need to be done so that we understand what we're putting money toward that we're not going to see when you come back next week?
So are you talking about other expenditures?
Well, I think when I asked why aren't you coming with next week with your list of what will be included in this, you mentioned that there were some needs between now and next week that you anticipate, and
Well,
I'm wondering
again,
what those are.
So I don't have a specific list. We're working right now in sort of an emergency situation, which I'm going to be excusing myself to the moment. I think this was mainly to appropriate funds to address these issues, so we didn't have to go through an appropriation process. We'll be able to identify where that funding source was in future items. Right now, the future item for consideration will be this Recovery Operations Center, which is focused mostly on the planning and building department. It's an initial phase, but eventually we'll wrap in other departments as well, and we will be bringing back those as report items and authorization items as they move forward. There may be moments where I'm asked to move on a specific item that falls below that threshold. We will report out if I do so, but I don't see an anticipation of using those fundings between now and next Tuesday.
I certainly see the need. I have some concern about oversight. So that's where my concern is. Thank you.
Mr. Schwedhelm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My questions are similar to my two colleagues. And I guess just starting back with, okay, March of 15, we approved this. My question is, how do we come up with the 2.5 million? Because it sounds like, I'm hoping it was a surprise to you too, but it leads me to question when figures come before us looking for some distribution of funds for a project. Now, I'm not sure what role the council will play to say, how did you come up with the 2.5 million? Because in this case, I don't know what the figure would be to do what we thought we'd get for 2.5.
Well, again, that's when we started to see an exponential growth, and we couldn't finally forecast that dollar amount, and it was well, we were getting estimates that nearly doubled the project costs at that point.
So who made the initial 2.5 estimate? Was that city staff or an
That was
outside?
city staff based on what they understood at the time, and when we started to get into the architectural drawing conversations, costs escalated significantly in that process.
Because again, I had similar comments as my colleague about the need for the service hub. It sounded great because it's not necessarily for the city, it's for our community members. And just to say, now all of a sudden, it's taken away from that need to go to this need. And I totally get we have a current need here. But the other concern was, when did we learn that it was not going to be feasible with the funding that we'd approved for that? If we made the decision in March of 15, when did we know this just isn't going to be enough?
So we can get that date to you. I don't have it offhand, but it was in the 15-16 era, probably the beginning of the 16 era as we went through the process, the beginning of 16 sometime, I would
So
guess.
a concern I have is that we're also now, and there's some other items on today's agenda, we're dealing with what many of us have called Saturday problems, all the issues and the priorities that we had before the disaster. And it seems like if there was 2.2 million available to maybe help us address some of those, why was that ever evaluated or contemplated to bringing forward since this wasn't going to go forward?
So again, we had a project on the books that we had funded. I think you're rightfully pointing out a timing issue, but we were trying to figure out how to we had several conversations with staff of bringing this back for council to deprogram the money. Unfortunately, we probably should have been more responsive than where we are today on deprogramming the money.
So that would be my request, that if this has been sitting there for a year, we still have issues that we're trying to now figure out, and now we have a disaster, a bigger priority. But I just would have, I guess, maybe appreciated being part of that conversation a little bit earlier on.
Mr. Tippett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Sean, are you telling us we need to look through the CIP budget for any defunct programs if we're looking for funding for present community needs?
Well, I mean, again, I think there's restrictions on some of how the CIP funding got set up, but we did take it to heart that when we heard look through the project list, and we are doing that right now to look through the project list and see if there's anything that is stuck or stalled or could be considered an optional experience. But we will be going through that in great detail over the next 6 months, Councilman.
Okay, thanks. The other thing that I wanted to bring up in relation to this item specifically is I understand you need to have money to be able to quickly respond to changing need. But what we're talking about doing here is essentially increasing your city manager contingency budget annually from $300,000 to 2.3 plus whatever's left in your current $300,000 budget. And so I think that does have to come with some degree of oversight and not just getting a report at the end of the year during the budget review. But could we actually get every week an updated list of what it is you've spent money on, just so we can stay abreast of what's going on in the city so we can respond to residents?
So I mean, again, I'm happy to provide about this $2.3 million. Happy to provide that input and that clarity of how we're tapping into the funding source. Absolutely.
Okay. I, for one, would really appreciate that. Thank you, Sean.
Mr. McGlenn, what do you think the possibility is that $2.3 million will be enough to get us through this disaster?
Not in the least.
So, Ms. Faulkner already mentioned that we've tapped into our unallocated reserve heavily in the last month or so. I expect that will continue. I would like to echo the Vice Mayor and ask for just some reporting on this. So we've got an idea of where we are on things. And I know that some of this disaster response is reimbursable through the federal and state declarations of disaster. Some of it may not be. We won't know all that for a while. But at some point, and I hope it's soon, I'd like to see kind of a running tally of what we're spending here.
And we are absolutely working on that. I mean, we will be developing that for council's review. We're getting our hands around it. And again, it's sort of that immediate emergency versus being able to tally it up, but we are working on that, Mr. Mayor. We will have it soon.
All right. And I know that the building across the street that was going to be the service hub has been vacant for this last period of time. Should we just expect that will be the case for the foreseeable future?
For the foreseeable future, yes. But again, I think there are opportunities that the council can start to look at around its assets that allow it to think differently, and that we think are part of as staff, or think of the part of the entire recovery project, and match up with the council's goals about providing more housing, economic development opportunity in the community. So I think there are conversations to be had. Part of that probably is even in the EIFD conversation that the council asked us to consider moving forward. So absolutely.
Right. As Councilmember Schwedhelm mentioned, there were Saturday problems before the fire, but there were also Saturday opportunities. And I think both the problems and the opportunities are still there. It's just a matter of coming up for air long enough to address them. Mr. Oliveris, you have this item.
Thank you, Mayor. Motion to approve closing the City Service Center Hub project and move the remaining funds to a new project for disaster recovery efforts to be managed by the city manager.
Second.
And
I have a question.
I realized I didn't ask if there was any public comment on this item.
Well, and I apologize, Mr. Mayor, I had a couple of follow-up questions, if I could, before you go to public
Please.
comment.
Go ahead,
So,
Mr. Rogers.
Ms. Lochner, I want to just make sure, you mentioned that we have already dipped into the reserves, but you mentioned the unassigned fund balance. Are you talking about additional dollars that have come in from sales tax, as we've seen, or are you talking about the 17 or 19% reserves that have been set aside?
So I'm talking about the excess over the 17%. If you recall, when we passed our budget, we used, there was close to $11 million. We used $5.5 million of that. I would say we've probably spent the additional $5 million already in response to this disaster. Not to say that a good portion of it might not come back, but just in the first 2 weeks, we spent $2.5 million.
Okay, so I'm hearing two different things there that I want to. So we are still at this, I apologize, 17 or 19%. I don't remember what the reserve number was. And the unassigned fund balance is everything over that in excess, correct?
Correct.
So we have not touched that. Was it 17 or 19%?
It's 17% is the upper end of the council goal. The council goal for reserves is 15 to 17%. We've tried to maintain it at that 17%. So we did have a significant amount of reserves over that 17% when we passed this last budget. We were planning on using the remainder of that to get us through the next fiscal year as well. That, is no longer an option for us, and we're going to have to figure out how we solve that problem going forward. But there is a significant amount of money been spent so far, and of course we haven't received any money back because we haven't claimed anything. We've just done some preliminary damage assessments and filed those with FEMA, but we haven't done an official claim.
So the second question, and this is more of a significant issue to me, how have we spent $5 million without any approval from the City Council?
We've simply overspent the salaries and benefits budget that we were given. I mean, it's not overspent if you look in total for the entire fiscal year, and we'll fix that at the mid-year process. We'll come back and say, we need this amount of money to get through the remainder of the fiscal year. If you look at the total budget, we haven't overspent our budget because we have 12 months of budget and we're not there yet. So we haven't technically overspent our budget, but if you look at on a month-by-month basis, we are on track to significantly overspend our budget. That will be coming back at a future report to the council where we will ask for additional funding to support the relief efforts and the response efforts that happened at the beginning of the month.
And as I point out, are still going on. The emergency situation has not lapsed. We're still working in a state of emergency. There are things that have happened during that course of time, and we're not ready to fully account for those things. What you're getting is a ballpark estimate about where we would be at the end of the fiscal year if we do not do a mid-year adjustment. But frankly, personnel costs, other than personnel costs in terms of services and supplies, so when we purchase things like buckets to go out into the community and provide those buckets and those suits potentially for our residents getting back, all those things were a cost. And they likely were they were all under the city manager's authority level, otherwise it would have been back here. But just think about how those things stack up rather quickly. So again, what Debbie is talking about is the course that we're on. That's why we're going to have to come back at mid-year and ask for a council adjustment in the budget. And that's why it is right now there is we estimate that the first moment alone was about $2.5 million, the first response error in the first 2 weeks, which includes overtime for city staff, but predominantly is a lot of money being spent on a fire response, which is our fire response. And it is going to be, those costs will only continue to rise as we go through this process.
Yeah, and you're not going to hear from anybody up here about not understanding what the level of response is to this, but whether we're in an emergency or not, we do still have fiduciary oversight of the budget and need to be informed of what's happening. And so I do look forward to that conversation as it comes forward as a mid-year adjustment.
Ms. Lochter, can you explain about the allocated reserve? I'm not using the right term, the 17 to 19%.
So that is, so there's several categories of reserve. We consider those assigned reserves.
Assigned reserves. I'm just wondering, does using that money require an action from the council?
No, it does not. Simply, well, what we will be doing is we're going to be using the resources that the council gave us for the entire fiscal year, and we'll run out of those resources before we get to the end of the fiscal year. At that point, we'll need to come back and ask for additional resources regardless, because we've spent money on things that it wasn't allocated for. So we know we need to come back with a budget amendment to deal with the costs of the response and the recovery. We just haven't done the analysis, or we'd be here now asking for additional funds. We don't know what that's going to be or when we're going to stabilize operations to where we can start getting a square corner to go from.
Thank you. I have a couple cards on this now. Mr. Canini.
Hello. The building next door for the City Services Center. Here's a little history for the new people. That building was acquired by the city by eminent domain. And do you know why the city acquired the building by eminent domain? The seller wanted to sell. This wasn't a normal eminent domain purchase. It was done to beat the tax man. It was fraudulent. And I wished I had had a tape recorder at that meeting, but I didn't. And the person who perpetrated the fraud on Uncle Sam was telling us about this, grinning from ear to ear, and telling us what a slick bureaucrat he was. He came right out and said it. When a property is acquired by eminent domain, there are certain tax advantages. So maybe that's new to some of you people, but I think others of you were involved in it. Did I just hear no accounting so far for this disaster? What the heck? My limited understanding of being reimbursed is you got to have real accurate accounting. And there's all kinds of categories for accounting. Now, I can't go into this too deeply because I'm speaking to you as a private citizen. But if you ain't got the paperwork straight and know what you spent where and when and on who, you ain't getting any money. And if they should somehow get you that money, by the time it goes through that chain to DC and comes back down the pipe, they may take that money back one way or another. You're going to need some real strict accounting. And you probably want to talk to some people about that. And there's all kinds of categories. And I kind of addressed this a little while back. If you put it in the right category with the right group, you can really balloon that money if you know what you're doing. But maybe you don't. Last comment. He's going to tell you after he spent the money? It's kind of late, isn't it? Hear about the old expression, close the barn door after the horse got out? Thank you for listening.
Mr. Merlin.
Discussion of this item is illegitimate while you're causing human rights atrocities. You have been stealing people's things. You have been pushing them on from the only spots that they have to survive and undergo the processes of living and not starving to death, not freezing to death. This is cruel and unusual. You're hounding people because of their economic status, because of the policies that you have enacted in this city. Call off your hounds, you fascist scum.
That's all the cards I have. And just for the record, I don't think there was any mention that there's not accounting going on here.
There is absolutely detailed accounting going on in this recovery process.
Thank you. Thank you for taking that out of order. We will go back to, I'm sorry. We have a motion and a second, and we'll be using the old-fashioned voting method here. Press your buttons, please. Thank you. That passes unanimously. Are there any statements of abstention from council members tonight? And mayor and council members' reports. Who wants to start? Mr. Rogers.
I will give a very brief update. A couple of weeks ago, and haven't had a chance to report out on it yet, there was a Sonoma Clean Power meeting where Sonoma Clean Power created a recovery subcommittee and allocated $100,000 in funds to be used in conjunction with other recovery efforts, including ours here. That subcommittee is myself, Supervisor Hopkins, Supervisor Hamburg of Mendocino County, and Councilmember Harrington of Sonoma.
Thank you. Ms. Combs.
Thank you. I have joined a, it says long-term recovery meeting, group based from the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disasters. Jenny Lynn Holmes, who's here, is one of the co-chairs. We're looking not at the sort of planning process, but the implementation of how to make sure folks are okay in the long run. I have a long-term recovery guide that comes from National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. FEMA is also providing guidance and helping to organize this group. So I'm currently sort of serving as the liaison. At some point, it may be appropriate to have a conversation about who the official city representative to the group should be. The city does not have voting power on the group, but is expected to provide input and feedback. So I'm just letting you know, and if you would like access to the long-term recovery guide based on other groups, I would be happy to provide copies. Thank you.
Any other, Mr. Tibbetts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, throughout this disaster, I'm sure it was this way for all the members of council, but we probably got a lot of great ideas relayed to us from members of the public who are experiencing this directly. And I've been taking a list of...
Hold on just a minute, please. If you disrupt this meeting again, I'll have you escorted out. Is that understood? I'll take your smile as a yes. Go ahead, Mr. Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But, you know, throughout the course of this fire, one of the things that I think merits further exploration is updating our building code to have garage doors have a redundant power system behind them so non-ambulatory seniors could get out of an emergency situation in their vehicles. I personally knew somebody who died because that wasn't the case. Another one is looking at sirens in our community to update and notify residents when there is a disaster or one is about to occur. We learned from this disaster that without power there's no landline access, and we learned that fires and earthquakes take out cell towers, making Amber Alerts probably difficult if not impossible to be used. The other one is looking back at our Resilient City Ordinance, which I think is fantastic. I know Director Guin was in here a minute ago and he's now left, but I think it's a really fantastic ordinance. But two changes that I think we ought to look at making to that ordinance is to allow building designs to actually occur with his authority as we approved, but smaller within the footprint, not to go over it, but smaller. As the price per square foot goes up, which it's anticipated to do, this is one way that people with insurance gaps may be able to actually budget rebuilding their house. And it also might be a smaller footprint, therefore allowing smaller lot sizes to accommodate accessory dwelling units. And the final thing that I want to bring up is, much like the county approved in their resilient ordinance, is allowing RV and mobile homes throughout the entire city and not just the fire-affected areas. If I was a resident in Coffey Park that lost my home, maybe having that mobile unit in my driveway wouldn't make sense because that's more likely going to be used as a staging area for a contractor. And I also may be more comfortable with friends or relatives in their driveway somewhere closer by to the creature comforts of home. And also it might allow more opportunities for people to remain in the city, as contractors, again, may need to use the actual disaster site for staging or their own personal occupancy and habitation. So, you know, instead of putting all of those ideas into various items to be put on the agenda, Councilmember Rogers volunteered to me earlier, you know, why don't we put on the agenda an opportunity for all of us to come back and talk to staff, get an update about all the work that's gone in already, because I know that Director Guin, since drafting the Resilient City Ordinance, may already be making these changes on his own, within his own authority, but just having a conversation about what we're doing and give us the opportunity to chime in and tweak the good policies that we've already done. So I guess that is my motion, is can the council take an opportunity to have this conversation, to look at these policies and talk about them further and relay them to staff?
Second.
Okay, we'll take that up at a future meeting as our policy dictates. Any further council member reports? Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Really fast, one of the questions that I keep getting over and over again, and not agendized, so obviously we can't discuss it, but I keep being asked about the status of district elections, and is there anything that we can say to the public as an announcement? And if, I know we're going to be agendizing this at some point in the future, we'll obviously discuss it then, but is there a way to give just sort of a status update?
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes, I'll be happy to provide a status update. I'd propose I'll send an email to you all that lays out where we are currently.
Is there a way for the public to get that information?
Certainly. I'm also happy to give an update. I'm actually will not be here at the meeting next week, but will be here at the following meeting and would be happy to give a report out at that time if you would like.
And do you need us to agendize it?
It can be part of my city attorney report.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to approval of minutes. Any changes, additions, corrections to the minutes of September 26th or October 3rd? We'll show those approved as submitted. And we're on to the consent calendar. Ms. Hurtado.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 12.1 is a resolution, Garage 1 and Garage 12 hourly user fee reduction effective date change. Item 12.2, resolution, extension of proclamation of local homeless emergency. Item 12.3, resolution, grant agreement for Homeless Services Center. Item 12.4, resolution, ratification of purchase order and payments to Playcorp Wisconsin for playground equipment at a place to play and waiver of any defects in purchasing process.
Thank you. Council, are there any questions on the consent calendar? Mr. Soy.
I have comment, but no questions at this point.
All right.
Could I
Mr.
would ask that we
Schwedhelm.
pull item 12.3 from the consent
All right.
calendar.
Any other questions? All right. Can we have Ms. Kelly here?
Good afternoon, Mayor Corsi and members of the council.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you for coming on down. So I have a couple of different questions on this. Let me just start from a broad perspective. Has there been any neighborhood outreach regarding these requested expanded hours?
Excellent question, Tom. We have not done any outreach yet about the expanded hours. I think just with everything that has been expected of staff recently and of the service providers, but we can do that. I'm thinking back to the community meeting that we had in the end of September at the Round Barn. We did talk about our plan, the services plan for addressing the encampment, and that included expanded hours at the Homeless Service Center. I'd have to look back at the press release and see if it specifically, which also went out to social media outlets, to see if it had the specific language about the Homeless Service Center. So there has been some, but we have not done extensive outreach.
I would really encourage us to do that just so there's no surprises. And rather than say, how do we get to this suggested program expansion, I guess my concerns would be, is there a reason that we could not have it basically all day rather than close it from 11:30 to 1? Is there a reason we couldn't do it 7 days a week instead of just 5? Why don't you, let's just start with those two.
Well, I think we could certainly do those things, but it would cost more money, and so we're looking to the balance of funds that are available from the $600,000 that council approved with the budget in June. There's about $100,000 left, $103,000 left, and the rest of that went to the Sam Jones Hall for the housing, the shift to the housing-focused shelter. So we certainly could expand it, but we would need more funding to do so. And really, when we're looking at our strategy for the encampment, we're looking at the need, and really there was a need addressed for that people don't have a place to go during the daytime, and so that's why we're proposing to expand the hours by those 3 hours each day.
So again, I totally get the reason for it, but to say, yeah, between 11:30 and 1, you can't go here, which seems to be in the middle of the day.
Right.
And I get there's going to be additional costs, so I am, I guess, I'm supportive of actually applying the additional resources necessary to make it so it's, I would argue, even be more effective. Which leads to the next question. The way this is proposed here, is it considered to be a Housing First program?
Another great question. So this is not considered Housing First. That would also require additional funding. We could, if that's council's wish, come back with a budget for that and a scope of work. That said, if somebody coming through the Homeless Service Center is referred on to Sam Jones Hall for shelter, that shelter has now been reprogrammed to Housing First, and they would have access to those services there.
I guess my interest would be in what I thought the direction from the council would be is that, no, we're going to be a Housing First organization, and all our programs should be focused on this. So I see this as, Mayor Corsi said there's both problems and opportunities. This is an opportunity. Let's change the model of the Homeless Services Center and make it a Housing First. And I agree there's additional costs that I'd be very open to exploring. And again, as I thought this would come before our hub model, competing interests, but again, funds are available for issues dealing with in our community. So I'd have a real strong interest with that. And when it comes to the desired outcomes, I noticed in the report they didn't actually call them desired outcomes, specifically goals. In other words, what I was seeing, here's how many showers we'll provide, here's how many loads of laundry we'll do. I don't see that as a desired outcome. What are we hoping to accomplish by having this open there? And again, getting back to that focus of we want people to get housed and focus on that. I'm not sure how those outcomes get us to where we're trying to go. Can you help?
It's a day services center, so those are typically the services that are offered through a day services center. And if you want the outcomes in the scope of work to be more housing focused, then that would require additional resources. Really, we were trying to do the best that we could with the funds that were remaining as part of our strategy for addressing the encampment.
So then going back to that, so if you use, there's 100K left, so we're going to do a program that fits 100K. I noticed on our meeting back in July when we had like 6 or 7 different votes, and expanding Homeless Support Center was not, or Services Center was not one of those, but ones such as supporting a support fund program to include a background check and reporting for client support fund, recommendation to a client support fund program to include a background check and reporting. Also, recommendation to provide a risk mitigation fund program. Where are we with those initiatives that were unanimously agreed to by this council?
That's a great question, Tom. Again, and I don't have an answer of where our status is at there. Reflecting back to the 11th, and sorry, my memory is not entirely clear of that evening. Been distracted with other things. I recall council giving us direction to prioritize the homeless encampment cleanup pilot program, and what we're bringing forward to you tonight is part of that strategy. And so that's where we were coming from with that. That's where we're coming from with what's before you this evening, is prioritizing the pilot program. I'm certainly happy to go back and look at, our plan for the other items that you are bringing up this evening.
And would you have, or how long would it take for you, not you specifically, although maybe you, to tell us if we did decide to go 7 days a week, including the lunch period, housing-focused shelter, additional resources would be needed, how long would it take to find out what that figure is so that we can make that decision if there's enough interest?
A couple weeks would be my best guess.
Okay. And for the rest, that's what my interest is, that we've stated we want to be a housing-first organization. Here's an opportunity. I get it exceeds what was originally allocated for that. But again, what we've heard from this council, that our goal is to end homelessness, not just manage it. And I think this, although it's worthy cause and it will help with the pilot program, I think it's not going to get us to the goal that I think we all want us to be at.
I'd just like to add that it would, I estimate a couple weeks to come up with a budget, not necessarily to implement a program. We'd have to check in with our provider and see their capacity.
Is that a motion for a future agenda item?
Well, I'm not sure if we can't just, I don't know, ask the city attorney if we...
I'll second it if he needs a second, but I'm trying to figure out if he does.
It's unclear to me what the vote is going to be on. I mean, we don't have a motion pending on this particular item, which could take a number of different shapes. There could be friendly amendments. Whether this needs to be agendized separately, I think it's still.
So if we could, would we be able to do it tonight if I were to make a motion rather than 5 days, 7 days a week, rather than have it closed 11:30 to 1 o'clock, open that entire time frame, and have it be a housing-focused services center? Now, I know some of the data, we don't have the dollar figures, but are we able to make that motion today without knowing the cost?
From a Brown Act agenda perspective, yes, but my concern is that we're not in a position to do that because we haven't worked with the provider, to see if resources are available.
We could take a vote on this item tonight, direct staff to bring back information on what Mr. Schwedhelm is proposing in 2 weeks. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That works for me. Thank you.
So he doesn't need a second to bring it back in 2 weeks. We've got an okay just to do that. Okay, that's what I was asking.
We may need to do that, but let's do these one at a time and in order.
Okay.
We're not there yet. Did you have questions, Mr. Rogers?
Yeah, Councilmember Schwedhelm asked many of the questions that I had. One of the ones that I'm still looking for an answer on is the $32,000, $32,500 from this appropriation. It says it goes for storage, utilities, and miscellaneous, which includes portable toilets. My question specifically is whether or not the portable toilets are public during the hours that the center is open, not just for those who are looking to stop into the center, but anybody who might be walking by and not want to engage as much.
Great question. I defer to Catholic Charities and how they regulate the porta potties at the homeless service center. It's my understanding that they're there for anybody that comes by the center, but the specifics of that, I'd ask Jenny Lynn.
Can you give a thumbs up, sideways? Okay, good thumbs up. Thank you.
Ms. Combs.
I'm really glad to see this coming forward and strongly support the amendments made by my colleague. We need places where people can go 24/7, 7 days a week. That's what 24/7 is. And I am also really concerned. I appreciate we are housing first and we want to keep the housing first model going forward. But I'm really concerned that we lost 5% of our housing and we had a 2% vacancy rate. And the mathematics of that is that 3% aren't going to find a place to stay in our rental units in the population that's the Sunday population, not the, what we will call the Saturday previously homeless population. It's my understanding that we had about 20 beds that we are clearing an area now as part of this project, and that there were easily 70 and probably more than 70 people. Clearly, there aren't enough beds, even if people are willing to go to them.
No, we're not going to
I have the floor.
Ma'am,
I have,
please. Please.
I have the floor.
You do not have the floor. You don't own the floor.
Ma'am,
I'd like to know if
ma'am,
these are going to...
would you like to be escorted out for disrupting the meeting?
Yes.
We have a process here. If you want to speak to the council, you can turn in a speaker card.
I want to know if
You're not helping.
and laces are illegal.
Thank you. Ms. Combs, continue.
So, thank you. So I would really like us
Squirrel alert!
to come back and review our discussion of safe parking and at least 2 tent encampments on city property, funding appropriately the service provider.
Okay, look,
So
you're provoking, okay?
Yeah.
You're provoking me.
You're not helping.
If you want to continue your juvenile antics, next time, I'm asking the officer, without me directing him, to just show you the door. Ms. Combs.
So I'm asking that we, understanding the context of this situation, come back also for a discussion of seeking opportunity sites for safe parking and tent encampment and additional funding for a service provider to support those based on just the math of 5% housing loss, 2% vacancy rate. How do we do housing first in that context? I think that we have a recovery period where we will be able to really focus on housing first, but I think we're going to have at least a rough 18 months. And I'm hoping that I can get a second to bring this conversation back. If it doesn't come back naturally with your proposal, to fill this program out a little further.
I do believe it's coming at the next council meeting already, is it not?
Safe parking
I
is?
think it's on the 5th on the future calendar, is that right?
Safe parking is next week.
Oh, it's next week.
Does that include the possibility of looking at city opportunity sites and tent encampments next week? And increasing funding for supportive services so that people can go from an encampment to housing, so that they're housing forward, housing first encampment sites. Is that included in what's planned to come back?
My understanding is the discussion for next week is open-ended.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Can I make sure that the items I've just mentioned are included in next week's, and then I don't need to make a motion?
Actually, if I may, we do have a 9-day preliminary agenda noticing requirement. What is on the agenda for next week is safe parking. Additional items beyond that would need to wait until the 5th or thereafter. We don't have a meeting scheduled for the 28th.
So I guess I'm just trying to sort out, some items can come forward and some items can't. I'm trying to sort out which ones are which. Safe parking does not, when we designated safe parking, we had said tents were part of safe parking originally. So I'm trying to understand why the use of a tent wouldn't be included in the safe parking conversation next week. And if an encampment could be considered part, if an opportunity site in the city would be part of that conversation next week also. I just am trying to make sure everything's included, and I think there's a way to include it. So I'm hoping that we can work that out.
Very good.
Is there a funding conversation in next week?
Not that I know of. I have not had a chance to review that agenda item yet.
Okay.
So I do not know the particulars of what is included.
Okay.
I am aware that under CHAP, we included we included both tents and vehicles.
Yeah.
So that may be part of that agenda. But an encampment is generally seen as a different item than a safe parking program.
I'm willing to call it a safe harbor.
Ms. Combs, the request that was made, and my understanding of it, was to bring back safe parking for discussion, and that's what I believe is on the agenda for next week.
Then I would like to move that we have the more expanded conversation when we're able to do so through our agenda process. And I guess I would need a second on that.
Thank you. Does that get to your questions on 12.3? We'll take that separately when we get to the vote. All right, I do have some cards on that and other consent items. For 12.2, the extension of the homeless emergency, Gregory Furon. He'll be followed by Tisha Royalty.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. The city should know as much as it can about itself. And obviously you're learning from your city manager and from your staff about what's happened with the fires. One of the things that is on your agenda, the thing that I'm speaking to, is your monthly extension of the emergency. And in that resolution, you don't say anything at all about the impact of the fire on homelessness. It's as if it never happened, and I think that's less than what you owe the city. It's less than what you owe yourself. So I'd like to ask you to, on the next extension, please have your staff report as best they can on the current state of homelessness. What's happened since then? Add that to the census, come up with some phrases, recognize that your conditions today are different than they were before the fire. Thank you.
Thank you. Tisha Royalty. She'll be followed by Scott Wagner. Is Tisha here? Scott Wagner. Is Scott Wagner here? Yes.
Hello. I've been down at the 6th Street, 5th Street, 9th Street area for the last 30 hours, and I anticipate being there longer. The police chief let us know through Sergeant Wolf that they would be coming sometime after 7 a.m. this morning. They have not come. They have not updated their timing. And people are starting to believe that they're not going to come, and so they're not getting ready to leave. Now, you have not given a second to a very reasonable effort to try to have a normal communication process around the fact that at the moment we've got about 80 people under 6th Street. We've got, especially 5th Street is especially just not moving. What are you going to do? What are the police going to do when they come? Some of these people are really adamant about it, and this is not from us fomenting. These are people who have been scattered before, and they're tired of it, and they're convinced in some way that they're going to be able to get away with it, and you won't even speak about it. You won't second a simple motion to take care of people the way that we advocate in our Christian societies, the way that we as atheists just simply understand the deep need for people to have basic things, the way that you said in your emergency resolution. I'll try and bring it up rapidly, but I want you to hear again what you said a year ago. Do you remember? It was concerned about extreme peril from a safety standpoint for these individuals, and you will not second a minute. You will not second a simple request to have a discussion around this. And in the meanwhile, you have people like me that are there for days right now, waiting for those cops to come. Not sure whether they'll pull out, all stops. Not sure whether we'll have to do something in the realm of civil disobedience. Now, our lawyers are working really hard, and soon they'll be working really hard to get you to understand that this is an inexorable process, that you will allow these people to live on the sidewalk. You will allow them basic rights And hopefully you'll have the common sense to not consider a porta potty some kind of advocacy for their lifestyle, which you deem inadequate, inferior. Please. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to come here and yell. I've had a really frustrating day, and I'm going to have a really frustrating night because I have to keep awake, because I don't know what your servants will do in the name of your government. People who will not talk about this.
Thank you. All right,
Thank you.
A few cards on 12.3, the grant agreement. Gregory Furard. He'll be followed by Tisha.
First of all, I want to thank you all for considering extending the hours. As Scott pointed out, there's a crisis going on right now under those underpasses. And for the last week, we've been trying to figure out, and even earlier than that, we've been trying to figure out who we can help get into your shelters. You said there's 20. We have 50 requests right now of people under the shelter, under the underpasses, who want to go to Sam Jones, who've gone to the Homeless Service Center during the limited hours they had and registered. There probably would be more if those of us who could help them could come during our lunch hours and help them during 11:30 to 1. It's really hard to get volunteers to help people go through the process if you're limited to the times when we're working, or on weekends. So please extend the hours so that you have a fully functional homeless service center where the community and the people under the underpasses could work together. That seems only reasonable. Second, I don't know how you define a housing first day center. And I want to know how housing first enough a porta potty is, or mail, or anything else that keeps people managed. I understand your need, and I urge you to try to get them into housing, but you can't imagine how hard it is with the illusion that you're going to somehow get into housing, and all of us are trying to buy into that optimism, when we see at the same time people criticizing and maybe suggesting that you not fund anything that keeps them alive now. Thank you.
Is Tisha here? Your turn. Followed by Peggy Hendricks.
I want to thank everyone for being here, council members, and for allowing me to speak on this subject. I guess I'm not really that political when it comes to, but when it comes to this issue, I feel like it's necessary for me to speak. I've sat by and I've watched this age come upon us, and I've sat back and I've kept quiet most of the time. I've played the role of, you know what I mean? I've fit the pyramid, if you will. I have done my best to become a productive member of society. I have a career in medical and in entertainment, but right now I am living on 5th Street in a tent. I wish I could say I wish I could say that I was a fire survivor, but in reality, we are all fire survivors. I'm not going to sit here and spiel on ridiculous conspiracy theories. I'm not going to sit here and play into something that we all know is here. I'm not the most perfect representation of the people, but I am. You know, I feel as though I am very important when it comes to the structure of this new era that we are upon. We are here. This is the new age. This hasn't been done before. I don't care what, I mean, I'm not going to get into, my point is that I am homeless, and I don't see myself as homeless, because for months and a couple of years now, I have been studying the homeless lifestyles, not just here, but in Los Angeles as well. I'm from here originally, but when I was 16, I moved to Los Angeles in 2006, and I kind of finished my growing up. I'm 28. I wish I could say that I was in college and I had, you know, graduated summa cum laude or something awesome like that, but I'm not. I'm just the princess of the peasants, as if I had to see it my way. Of course, not in the most perfect form, but I wish that to be heard on the subject, because I feel like it's something that everybody's a little bit afraid to mention, and I can use esoteric terms, I can use, like, you know what I mean, legislative terms if you'd like, but in reality, I'm here to let you know that what we are doing is, there's something faltered here, and I mean, I'd rather, you know, I wish I could be in college or doing something, like, you know what I mean, something better with myself than learning about how to be homeless. In an age where, religiously speaking or spiritually speaking, I should be at my highest peak. I am not just trans, I also speak for the transgender community too. Actually, why not? I think I do enough time on that team to be able to represent them as well. I try not to live that sort of life because I'm not a victim. But I'll be damned if I'm someone's villain. And at this point, the only thing left to become is victorious. And I feel like as a city in this new time, we have the opportunity to do it. If there's an opportunity for a new world order, it's here. But the only question I'm asking the council members is, do we choose to sacrifice more of our, you know what I mean, like, what is?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Peggy Hendricks.
Good evening.
Pull that microphone towards you just a little bit.
First of all, I want to say...
Pull that microphone down. There you go.
First of all, I want to say I learned that you cannot fight City Hall, and that's not what it's meant for, to fight. We all have to work with each other, and we're supposed to help each other to have a good community. With that being said, I want to say I became homeless, a couple years ago, and but I've been acquainted with Catholic Charities, because I used to live there in 2000 in the cancer, in the back. When I became homeless, I don't have my teeth because I was raped. I was dragged in a car and taken out to Hull Road, way out there in the dark. Raped and had my meeting sheet, my wallet, my phone, my teeth, and my my soul taken. And I guess that's how I got my relationship with my higher power the best. I came across a roof over every head out of the library, and it was a 10-year plan to end homelessness, and that was in 2006, I believe. I've seen some of you guys' names on that 10-year plan. So that's not working, that 10-year plan. A lot of money's going through the City Hall, a lot of money. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people like another gang, and I see that graffiti on the wall, which is, Gelati, Argonaut, PG&E, City Santa Rosa, the boys. I know them personally, some of them. Safe parking, that $100,000 that you were, that I seen you at that meeting, when you're talking about how people didn't know how to ask to keep it together. Ask these people. So they were going to lose $100,000 of that safe parking, and then they were going to divert it someplace else. I don't have a car. But it does pertain to the homeless. The homeless, which are some of your family members, no doubt. I would like to know why you had a meeting with Jenny Lynn Holmes at the living room. It's a place for women. I've seen you in the parking lot. Do you remember that, Tom? I don't trust people who know how to pronounce Tom's last name. To me, that they grew up with him. And so, this is where the money is. When gentleman up there, I accidentally made it here. And he was approved for $154 million for that Black Hawk, or that area up there. Ooh. Is anybody opposed? My mouth fell open. I had teeth. I get my teeth Friday. I'll be going to court. I've been trying to, I have all my paperwork, for all these recoveries. So much recovery in this county. I'm recovered. I have one addiction, and that's cigarettes, and I'll pick them up off the sidewalks. A lot of money's been spent, and I think there's going to be an audit. I've seen the state.
Thank you, Mrs. Hendricks.
Have a good evening. I got to get to the
Merlin, followed by Anita LaFollette.
Thank you, Julie Combs, for bringing it up, for being the only person brave enough to bring up solutions that will really make a difference. Shame on the rest of you for not seconding it. Juvenile antics? Martin Luther King said that riots are the voice of the unheard. You leave us no options. You leave us no options but to denounce your illegitimate process. You are stripping people of the only cover between them and the freezing night sky. It is cruel and unusual. There were 85 people at least in the underpasses. We heard tonight there's 20 beds available. There were 85 people before the notices caused many of them to scatter and hide in whatever corner they could. So that you, as you're providing services, can't find them to provide those services because they're hiding. Where do they have left to go? Nowhere. Nowhere left to go. You destroyed the camp at Homeless Hill. The fire destroyed the camp at the bottom of Fountain Grove. You destroyed the camp at Doyle Park. The underpasses are the only large camp left. They're the only place people can gather to give themselves some community and shelter. And now you're going to go prosecute them for misdemeanors. This is punishment first. It is not housing first. You just asked for more info that you haven't asked for, or that you haven't gotten, or that you haven't discussed, or that you haven't used. You just asked for more info. You don't even know what you can provide people, what resources you can give them. And yet here you are, kicking them out of the only safe places that they've found. You don't know what you can provide them, and yet you're kicking them out. This is punishment first. It's not housing first. Where are the houses you're putting them in? That's housing first. When you find a house to go to offer someone to say, here, walk through the door, that is housing first. Not when before that, you're out kicking them out of the only safe places that they have. Where should they go? Where should they go? Any answers?
Anita La Follette.
Guess not.
She'll be followed by Dwayne DeWitt.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing me. It's a hard act to follow. I'm really tired of people coming down here who have no shelter and apologizing to you. And they apologize to me, and they apologize to host. And they're just as much human beings as us all. And I'm so tired of the stigma of what we call homelessness, because it reduces people to apologies for being who they are. They do not need to apologize to you. I'm sorry if you feel that you are on some kind of a pedestal, but you're really not, because you are made of the same thing as the rest of us. And I just want to say, in view of what Host has been trying to do, they are perpetrating the stigma of homelessness, because there is no way for us to tell what's going on. There's no transparency in the system, and I would like you to ask them that in 2 weeks from now when you give them a lot more money, because we can't tell who is eligible to go into Sam Jones and who is not eligible. And I have people telling me they can't get in because they're not fire victims. I don't think that's true, but all I see are people walking around with clipboards, and they can't talk to me. They can't talk to me. And I'm there overnight at the 6th Street, in the rain, in the fog, trying to help these people gather their things together so that it won't all go to the dump. But the people from Catholic Charities are not allowed to even talk to me. So what do I tell the people that I'm advocating for, the ones who have no medication, the ones who are obviously mentally challenged, the ones who have other illnesses, the ones that are 87 years old in a wheelchair? What do I tell them? Because I don't know if they can get in. I don't know what the eligibility criteria is, because these people who are out in the street helping them won't talk to me. And I think that perpetrates the stigma of that there's some kind of a thing out there that we all have to handle and manage. That's not what they are. They're human beings, and they don't have a shelter. And if you want to come out and try it, and listen, I tried it last night. I couldn't find a porta potty. Where was I supposed to do? I couldn't spend the night there. I didn't have a porta potty.
Thank you, Ms. LaFollette. Dwayne DeWitt, be followed by Thomas Ells.
I'd like to use the overhead if I may. Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland within Santa Rosa. This is the junior college newspaper, the Oak Leaf. I believe it should win awards for this excellent issue. They put together an excellent map within it that pointed out how people were evacuated out, homes lost. And in there, it also shows just down here where our city area is and where our homeless are now struggling to survive and basically facing even more troubles because the rain will be falling tonight again, perhaps. Hard rain is going to fall numerous times this fall. So I brought a copy of Vision 2020, the general plan for the city from 1996. And in that general plan, it pointed out that we were basically going to be having more homeless shelters. And it said it with a plural. And as I look at it right now, my glasses aren't as good as they should be, and I realize I'm just going to talk with you about this. And if you doubt what I say, I see one of the former council members is here from the approval of this general plan. At the time, Santa Rosa didn't have enough housing for all income levels. And that's what general plans strive to do, is provide enough housing for all income levels, including those who are broke, those who have nothing. And in this plan, the word shelter was plural. So I bring that up because we've only got really one major shelter, and I'd like you to try to get some others going tonight. I mean, they're going to be wet again out there. So over in Roseland, where we've been annexed, there's a warehouse at the Roseland Village Shopping Center. It's empty, it's big, and it's just within a stone's throw of the Camp Remembrance, they call it now, where 28 homeless people live under tents in the rain against the elements with no heat. And it's like, well, you folks now could make some differences, and Catholic Charities could work with you and get these things going. So you have that opportunity. There's a state of emergency. You can push the envelope. I've heard a lot of people talk for the last 5 weeks about the different approaches. Don't do lockstep. Do something different. Get people in off the street so that they're not out there in the weather. And let's just be that humane community that I know we can be. You folks are good people. We all bleed red. So let's work together and make sure nobody has to lay their head on the cement. Thank you for your time.
Thomas Ells, followed by Kathleen Finnegan.
Do you need this, sir? All right, I'll turn it off, put it down, talk it up, sir.
hard for me to follow eloquent speakers such as these. I have to say, though, I used to count myself as an anthropologist and now an apologist. Please look that up. The notices regarding vacation of the 6th Street undercrossing have really created a priority in all of our lives. It's very important to prevent their arrests, and the situation is chaotic. And even the Press Democrat reported, and I believe it was on the 7th, that the West Coast itself is in chaos. The entire West Coast, from Seattle to San Diego, the number of homeless is increasing. You can see the numbers. It's taking our time away from vital issues. We were not able to go to the court today to take someone to court because of the 6th Street undercrossing. Someone had a court date and we could not be there. He was not able to be there. And there was a county item, consent item today, to restrict all public comment on items for anyone to go before the Board of Supervisors to 6 minutes total time. And I don't know exactly if that meant 6 minutes total on any item, or if that meant an individual could only comment for 6 minutes. It was pulled from the Board of Supervisors' consent items and was not voted on today because there was opposition to it, but it was put on there. So we're going in kind of the wrong direction. I want to focus now on just a little bit of Greg's comments, which were about numbers of, we need to know how many people. Omar Medina, and forgive me, he said he was raised in a family that had 20 people in their household, 20 people in one house. There are many of those situations. We don't know how many people we have here, but we can count because, we can count some of them, the homeless, because in a hotel or a motel, you're homeless. They're only allowed to rent that for less than 30 days. Those people are homeless. So everyone that's in there, that's being rented, whether they're being paid for by insurance or not, everyone that's a local person, we can count those people, those are homeless. They're renting a hotel, they're renting a motel, they will have a home when it's rebuilt, but right now they're homeless, so those people would be counted, every single one of them. And we should count them, forgive me.
Kathleen Finnegan.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Finnegan. I live in Santa Rosa. Good evening. I wish it were a good evening. After the joint meeting of the council and the Board of Supervisors last week, when we all had such hope and warm fuzzy, Sonoma strong, Sonoma proud, together we can't do it. I can't tell you how I felt. Not even 24 hours went by when the eviction notices were posted on 6th Street and the other streets. I could not believe it. I spent much of today down at 6th Street talking to people, trying to figure out where they think they can go. Some of them were packing up, some of them weren't. There was one gentleman who was packing up, and he had a big planter with a plant in it. It was a small tree. He put that on his cart. It was precious to him. I can't tell you what a lovely man. Another gentleman was cleaning up his stuff. He was sweeping the sidewalk. He was sweeping the street, the gutter. And some sort of deranged fellow came by, threw his stuff on the ground, then threw his water on the ground, threw all the stuff on the ground right where Wally had been sweeping. And I said, Wally, look. And he said, oh, that's all right, I'll take care of it. Some of us, he said, for some of us, the bell hasn't rung, but we have to take care of each other. So let's talk about taking care of each other and what you are doing sitting in those seats. Can you live with yourselves? Who are you? Mr. Rogers, who are you? Mr. Schwedhelm, who are you? Mr. Tibbetts, who are you? Mr. Corsi, who are you? Mr. Sawyer, who are you? Mr. Olivares, who are you? Maybe you can ask yourselves this question when you go home this evening that nobody could second the motion to give a little bit, a small bit of assistance to people in dire need. Look at yourselves in the morning. Can you look yourselves in the eye? Why don't you ask yourselves who you are? Thank you.
Thank you. Keep going. Come on, keep going. Get it all out.
Yeah.
We have a custom and a practice in this room that there is no applause. If you want to show your appreciation for a speaker, you know what to do. I ask you to do that. I ask you to have some respect for each other and for the people who are working here. So that's the last time I'm going to ask. Mr. Schrader, Chief Schrader, if the meeting is disrupted again, I would ask your men to please escort the disruptors from the room. Council, are there any further questions on the consent calendar? With the exception of 12.3, would you do the honors?
I move item 12.1, 12.2, and 12.4 of the consent calendar and waive further reading of the text.
Second. Your votes, please. That passes with 7 ayes. Mr. Schwedhelm, do you want to make a motion on 12.3?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, let me try. So I move a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa approving a grant agreement between the City of Santa Rosa and Catholic Charities and the Diocese of Santa Rosa for the operation of Homeless Services Center for the period of November 1, 2017 to June 30, 2018, and ask staff to return as soon as possible to increase the hours of operation from 5 days a week to 7 days a week, including the lunch period 11:30 to 1, and have it be a housing-focused shelter. And the definition of housing-focused shelter, since Catholic Charities is our local subject matter expert in that, ask them for that.
Second.
Ms. Gallagher, does that motion work?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Your votes, please. That passes with 7 ayes. Do we have cards for item 13? Public comment for items not on the agenda. Ann Seeley should be followed by Michael Titone.
Good afternoon, Mayor Corsi and Council. Ann Seeley, speaking for Concerned Citizens for Santa Rosa, but also as a board member of Sonoma County Conservation Action. In our discussion yesterday at our board meeting for Conservation Action, came up how housing might be improved for those who are going to rebuild here. There was the caveat always expressed on our board that it's going to be difficult enough for people to rebuild, and perhaps we could focus some funds in the city and in alliance with all of the many groups that are gathering money now to help subsidize some of those improvements for people. I think the response in Sonoma County by the multiple groups who've created funds is astounding, but shouldn't be, because this is our history, this is the way we are. One of the major improvements I could see would be undergrounding utilities. I understand that it wasn't the utilities in this city that started the fire, but there's always that potential. some of the suggestions that you made, Councilmember Tibbetts, I think could really help people build better housing, but they cost money. So I hope that if you are given the opportunity to participate in any of these funds, in the distribution of them, that you do set aside some funds for improvements to the housing that's rebuilt. Thank you. And by the way, I think you're doing an excellent job.
Michael Chitone, followed by Scott Wagner.
So, I don't know what to say. I mean, I expected a whole lot better from Santa Rosa. We're evicting people whose houses burned down. We're evicting people who never had a house but were chased out by the fire. A lot of them weren't given notice. They were alerted by their peers that the fire was approaching them. And a whole bunch of them flew to the 6th Street underpass. And, you know, I kind of thought that we'd put the homeless pilot program on hold, not necessarily because I think that the majority of people up here are of the, you know, really care enough about homeless people to do something like that. Not because I think that that you would respond to the pleas in the room about not evicting homeless people when they have nowhere else to go, because we've been saying that for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's the same thing every time. I thought that you would choose it because it's the path of least resistance for yourselves. It's not going to be easy to get away with this. There's a whole community of people who are willing to stick up for those people, because right now, the community, this city is acting monstrously, evicting people whose homes were burned down, who are fleeing the fire. It's shocking to me. I mean, that's not something that you see a whole lot in other kinds of cities. And I thought to myself, well, how do you justify this? Well, maybe you think they're getting into housing. Well, if it's true that there's 20 beds for 80 people, that's just not true. A lot of these people have nowhere to go. So I don't know, I don't think we can tell ourselves that. And this is more addressed, I guess, to the people, whoever might be listening to this, is we need to act together as a community, because we're the only ones who are going to do anything about this. Right now, you guys are in the way, and we're asking you to please step aside. Thank you.
Scott Wagner, followed by Margie Brunell. Please take it easy on the furniture.
I'll try. I don't want to raise my voice this time. I'd like to try to talk about management tactics. I have a graduate degree in business. I tend to look at things that way. Homeless first also means, just sort of lexically at this point, to me, it seems like it means that homelessness has to mean shelters, and that there's really nothing else. That's what I'm capturing in this. Because there's no pipeline after the shelter, really, to speak of, because we haven't gotten, we don't have the requisite ingenuity yet. But beyond that is, if you're not really a shelter candidate, then the method is via drop kick. And then let me give you an example, because I just want to, again, deal with tactics here. This morning, I haven't seen the host group at all. I've been there a fair amount the last few weeks. I would expect in a fullness sort of approach that when you've got 100 homeless people, that you would be running around, checking on them, trying to figure out what's going on with the population, who the problems might be in that population, how they are going to the bathroom. I mean, that would be interesting. None of you know, how they immaculately conceive that way. And they don't. This morning they came at 8 o'clock. We were ready for police at 7. We were confused why they weren't there in the first place. We assumed, quite correctly and nicely, that the city was going to make some sort of token effort at something besides get out of here. They came around, they spent about 45 minutes. There were 5 of them. They didn't hit every tent. They got about, as far as I could see, I'm just guesstimating because I was there, about 15 people to be enthusiastic about shelters. This is the other question that I have to ask you is, now I did graduate work and spent time on the street. I've been dealing with homelessness and mental issues for a long, long time professionally. A lot of people that are homeless can't be taken care of through a shelter, you know, for whatever reason. There's many reasons. I don't have time to talk about it. So in other words, if you take housing first and you mean shelters and then nothing else, ironically, just right even before you get to the beginning of that false funnel, in this case right now, you've already eliminated about 70% of the people who, for whatever reason, and I'll let you figure it out, they don't want to go to a shelter or they can't go to a shelter. So what I'm trying to say is that the team that you allocated to this work dashed off. They were gone by about 8:45. Nice people, don't get me wrong. Misguided, incomplete, not a homelessness solution. A sort of, to us, it looks like a wallpapering, and that's what has us. And so, Mayor, I would ask you for your forbearance about our excitement. Thank you.
Margie Brunel. She'll be followed by Cox. Courtney?
Hello, Council. I'd like to address you today with some concerns I have about our homeless neighbors and friends and ourselves. I speak as a homeless person myself. I am fortunate enough to have a vehicle to sleep in. However, I know that there is no place to use the restroom, either for the people under the bridges or the people in Doyle Park, as the restrooms are all locked up by 7, 8 o'clock at night. So the neighbors get the pleasure of having somebody use their yards and streets as a public toilet. I think it's a concern for our city and ourselves and our neighbors when we allow that to go on. And I think it'd be a simple fix if we could leave some of the restrooms unlocked at night for people to go in and use them. It just seems like if we treat people in a humane way and expect that they should be treated respectfully and have access to basic sanitary services. I speak as a retired nurse that we don't want to allow that kind of situation to go on, and I think it's important that we address it at this point. Similarly, the 9th Street Bridge, there's a couple of porta potties near the Morgan Street, not enough for the population that needs access to restrooms and privacy and basic sanitation. That's my main concern at this point, as far as we have people, 60-year-old women and 3-year-old children sleeping out in tents, and temperatures below 40 degrees is a concern as well, which I would mention. So taking away their tents and sleeping bags would probably not improve the situation. However, the sanitation is my main concern I wanted to address, and it seems like it would be something we could certainly take care of in an easy way, and it would probably make a big difference for the neighbors and the people who are living out there who have no place to have a private restroom. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. So Courtney Cox, followed by TM.
Hey guys. Dude, you guys need to like chill out a little bit. You guys are like real tense. You guys need to like bring it down a notch. Like, we're tired. We've been like doing the work out there that you guys should be doing, and you guys need to just keep it copacetic, all right? That being said, just want to dive in here. No one wants our community members being under an underpass when it's unclean, it's unsafe, and especially given our state's outbreak of hepatitis C. But the reality is that people are safe in numbers. People are dry under overpasses. You guys, City Council, and your police department that you're using as your goons right here in front of us and also on the streets are telling people to simply disappear. That is not a solution to homelessness. Housing First program is a lie sold to homeowners, businesses, and general public as a public safety concern, clean up sites, and provide services. But we the people know that this is another lie made to be paid at the expense of the most vulnerable during a fire crisis, during the winter, during the state of emergency on homeless, during the housing shortage, during the rent increases, evictions, harassment from landlords. This is what the City Council provides as a solution. You could have done all of this. You could have done the cleanups. You could have had the fire people come in and do the removal of the trees and stuff and still not had made it a misdemeanor. You could have taken a step back and said, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to criminalize being without a home. We're going to, for the time being, there are no shelters. Telling people to move along when there's no place else to go is against the Constitution, is against human rights. You're violating that. You're on the wrong side of history right now, and you need to check yourselves. You've lost your connection with the earth. You've lost your connection with yourselves, and you do not interrupt my 3 minutes to yell at people. You need to chill. Bring it down. I still have 3 minutes while you're interrupting me. I would like to add 25 seconds because he's interrupting me. Are you kidding me? You're taking away my time? Are you kidding me right now? That's okay. I will use my voice. I will use my voice. That is okay. You take away my 3 minutes. I had 1 minute left. I'm timing myself right now for 1 minute. I will be done at 6:02.
Excuse me.
You are totally taking away people's rights. I have no idea why you're doing this. It's totally unnecessary.
If you give me a minute, I'll tell you what I'm doing.
All I'm saying is to tell you that what you're doing is unnecessary. It's cruel and unusual. You would not be doing this, Chris Corsi, if it was filled with red shirts. If it was filled with the community. We can fill this hall, and just because they're not here right now doesn't mean that they won't be here next week.
Ms. Cox, I was not cutting you off. You do still have time. What I'm doing is asking the police department to remove that man up there. Chief.
The jails aren't full till after the sleep anywhere.
Do better!
Choose democracy! Don't choose this bullshit! Start!
Do better!
Would you remove the man up there who's clapping and flipping the council off, please?
That would be you.
Remove yourself.
It's the finisher.
You leave me no choice. We sit here and we listen respectfully, and all we ask in return is that you behave respectfully as well. I don't think that is a respectful response. TM is next.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to speak to everyone, not just people in front of me here. As a business owner in Railroad Square, I see I'm not here to play the blame game on anyone. This has become your guys' problem. You didn't create it. I don't feel that you guys have created this. You guys are getting the blunt of this. I do not feel, a lot of these people down there, some of them want to be there. They want to be homeless. I guess they have the right to be. This is America. They can do whatever they want, live wherever they want, but the problem is it's getting out of control. There's businesses down there. There's a SMART train. I don't know how many billions of dollars were spent to make that thing. People get off that SMART train, they come across there, and they go over there. I understand these people. What I'm proposing is what this gentleman over here said. There's places, big places, that are vacant. some of these people, like another person say, they have mental health problems. What I'm proposing is as a recovering addict myself, so you cannot help someone. You can't just give them things. What I feel, they have to get from the bottom and go up. In other words, get a big place, have them in there, and there's Caltrans crews out there. Have them go out and do. We all need self-purpose here. Everyone needs a purpose, a job. You guys have jobs. Everyone should have a job. What that job? Our job is not here to pick on each other. I mean, we are all adults. We are citizens of a community who is recovering from a disaster. And they're saying that a lot of these people lost homes are from the fire. I don't think that's true. I think they're from other homeless camps that came over there. Maybe some of them are. Some people don't have the means to get on their feet and do something. Let's give them a new start. Get a building. There's people out there who will do it. You're spending, I don't know how much money down there, put it in a building. For the people that want help, you say, hey, you have to, let's sweep, let's do this, let's do that, let's clean this, let's build that. There's people who will back this. And I just feel that everyone here, we're all human. Everyone deserves, and I understand that a lot of these people are saying they want to be homeless, which, okay, but we're a community, you know what I mean? I don't think it's natural to live underneath a bridge. I just don't think it's natural. It's not right. It's not cool. There's no place to go to the bathroom. You can't take a shower. Let's get together as a community and make this thing happen. It's that simple. There's no science. It's that easy. Everyone here can do it. It's very simple. Stop blaming each other. Let's get over this, pull together as a community, and make this work. There's the funding that is spent over there can obviously be taken to
Dwayne DeWitt, followed by Bob Hanson.
I'll use the overhead again if I may. Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland within Santa Rosa. And I believe centuries ago, someone pointed out the law and its majesty kept the rich as well as the poor from living under bridges. So we, 20 years ago, were talking about we were going to have these situations. There was plans with the plural for the homeless shelters. There's been an idea of using funds to help very low and low-income households. And I got to thinking, the generosity that has brought in tens of millions of dollars for victims from the fires, some of it could be used for these victims who didn't have a structure. Apparently, young people such as Dave Matthews came to town to visit Coffey Park and spoke with Supervisor Gore and pointed out that there's a way to use money from these benefits to rebuild not just houses, but community. You folks could be the ones to put forward an idea and say, let's use some of that money and some of that generosity to help those who are desperately in need. Now, you know me as just this guy that comes here and just talks about Roseland all the time, but when you did the annexation in '96 that created the county island where I was living, you already had a joint powers authority agreement up along here, what was known as the Roseland Redevelopment Project area, 264 acres. Within that area, there are spots where you can help with these things. Now, I've been talking with the city manager for as long as he got here about how to use federal funds that come in and help on projects like brownfields redevelopment. This was from 20 years ago when we got the city and the county to be supportive of our first efforts to apply for it. The county's gotten $392,000 to do phase 1 assessments here in this general area. You folks could work together with them. Here in this general plan from 1996, it actually said on one of the pages that you would work to redevelop the Roseland Village Shopping Center. So this isn't anything new that I bring to you. I hope, though, that you see in my efforts to always be polite and stay on point about all of this, if you don't do anything, people are going to feel you just ignore. You may listen, but you ignore. Please help.
Thank you. Bob Hanson, followed by Victoria.
Do you need this,
Yanez.
sir?
Good evening, everybody. First, Mrs. Combs, welcome home. Second, I'm proud to be a member of this community that came together during this crisis. I was proud of the way our community came together, rallied around our residents who lost everything. And I appreciate it. I was going to come and talk to Mr. Tibbetts about comments he made in the last city council meeting. The focus of our city council being twofold. This construction process they're aggressively promoting, and our homeless. But in lieu of the discussion tonight, I think Mrs. Combs and I have discussed a solution that might be agreeable to everybody. Let's open up this park right across the street. Provide showers, bathrooms, power. Let's consider this a social experiment where the city of Santa Rosa, above any city I've seen in the United States, offers a sanctuary park to our homeless community. Let's call up the National Guard and get a dozen mash tents out here and provide at least basic shelter for this community. I know you don't want to see this community right across the street in lieu that you just spent $700,000 at City Hall landscaping, but this is a viable solution. A sanctuary park for our homeless community. This isn't a problem singular to Santa Rosa. This is going on in every city in our country. And our homeless community are citizens of the United States. This is a result of a failed federal immigration policy for the last 30 years. Failed or non-existent. But that's past history. Now we have a community within our city that's facing a winter with no shelter. Together, we can provide one spot in our city where this community can come together with the basic necessities needed. I'd like a vote on this tonight. Will our city council agree to open up this park that provides bathrooms, showers, power? What have we got to lose? A little long at the end of the winter?
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Victoria Yanez, followed by Adrian Lobby.
Victoria Yanez, speaking for the homeless all over Sonoma County, but especially right now, those under the 6th Street Bridge and the adjacent streets. Now it's spreading around. I'm speaking for the old homeless, the pariahs, the ones everybody doesn't want to look at. That's why they can't be sleeping on the street, because it affects people's business. And all we care about is money. I'm not going by my notes. Anyway, we had inertia on our side with the disaster to do something for everybody who's homeless due to an emergency. This is disgusting that we have 85 infractions that we have to defend. People are just going to, The gentleman just commented that we cannot find a place for the homeless in this city or county. And you know I don't like to get down on you guys about it, because I believe in welfare institutions going 17,000, which squarely puts the duty for housing on the county. Anyway, we can find a site for the homeless in this community, and it's the jails. They're going after people that, at least the poster said, we really don't know what's going to happen, okay, but at least the poster said they're going after repeated and serious offenders. Okay, that means people have been homeless for a long time. But that also means that since the policy has been in place, that people have been cited once, targeted again, cited again, okay, in just this last couple of months. Some 2, some 3. The same person, because you're trying to build this system that nobody knows what the real rules are, but something's happening to scare everybody else off. So what I want to know is, what happened to the presumption of innocence? A lot of these cases have not been adjudicated at all. And now they're going to use that against them, that they wrote them an infraction. The city is implementing a policy of status discrimination. You should have your liability people look into that. Section 1983 of the United States Code. It was great that it was on KQED, though, on the radio show. I was very disappointed to see staff leave before I could speak, because it's been so long and all they can do is put people in jail, a year, another winter outside.
Thank you.
Jails first.
Adrian Lobby.
Housing never.
Hi, Adrian Lobby from Homeless Action. This morning I came, last night I went down to 6th Street to see how people were handling all of this, and it was raining. So I parked my car out on Morgan Street, and I had some papers in my hand, and I had a sign, and I'm like, oh, it's raining. And I went under the bridge, and it wasn't raining. And I had a little experience of why people want to be under that bridge. And it's not because we leave them alone there, although that's been helpful. It's because it's out of the rain. And this morning when I came back and I started to help people clean up, and there were a lot of people cleaning up and packing up, and a lot of their stuff was wet. The people out, you know, on the edges, because there's too many people to fit under the bridge anymore. And their stuff was like all wet. So we had sun this afternoon. People hung it up and tried to get things dried. But this is what life is like when you're homeless in the winter. And I want to just climb on to TM's idea that let's find a place where people can be, where they can be out of the rain, where they can use the bathroom and clean up and get on with their lives in the various ways. It's been really kind of bittersweet watching the recovery and the Somnoma, love is thicker than smoke, and a lot of the ideas that we've been asking you for since the emergency declaration around homelessness. Suddenly there's an emergency that matters, and so we're considering safe parking, we're considering RVs, we're considering one-stop centers where people can get their needs met. We're thinking about paying the landlords some money so they won't rent to them. Fantastic. But when I look and inquire in this stuff, 90% of it is for the newly traumatized. And so anytime you're at those tables, please, a trauma is a trauma. When you're displaced out of your home, it doesn't matter what was the reason, if it was a magic fire, or if it was a magic husband, if it was a job loss, if it was high rent. It's traumatic to lose your home. It's the same trauma. I went to Sam Jones yesterday to say, hey, this is happening on 6th Street. And I talked to one of the staff people there, and I said, we're just curious because we keep hearing different numbers of beds. And he pulled out the spreadsheet of the daily inventory and who was there. And we counted it up, the ones that are saved for the 6th Street people, there's 15 beds. Now, I know that number goes a little up and down. It's not enough. It's obviously
Thank you, Ms.
not
Lobby.
enough.
14.2, Ms. Hurtado.
14.2 report assignment of city contract with North Bay Corporation to Recology Sonoma Marin and waiver of $375,000 assignment fee payable by North Bay Corporation under our collection services agreement. And this is Fred Sempler. He is the general manager for Recology and will be responsible for the Santa Rosa contract.
Good evening.
Just a little bit of background. So we currently have a contract with North Bay Corporation, also known as the Ratto Group. We've had that contract since 2003. Ratto and Recology have been in a purchase agreement and want to finalize that purchase agreement with the transition of this contract. Recology, as you know, you awarded the franchise agreement to them effective January 1, 2018. Both Recology and Ratto sent a letter to the city requesting that we approve a transition or an assignment of the contract before January 1, which would allow them to complete the sale of Ratto assets to Recology and begin the transition of the contract and operations in Santa Rosa. Within the current collection services agreement, if an assignment was ever made during the term of the agreement, there was a $375,000 assignment fee that Ratto would have been responsible to pay the city. That assignment fee would have allowed for a due diligence of whoever the contract was being assigned to. Since we have already gone through an RFP process and basically our due diligence in terms of Recology having the capacity to serve the Santa Rosa community, we feel comfortable supporting the request for the waiver. There's only a month left on the contract, and we've already done our due diligence. I think I already covered this. So if the city approves, if council approves this assignment, we'll be able to move forward with Recology beginning services sooner. I know they're already receiving inventory of bins and anxious to get started, and it would also allow the completion of the sale to occur. And so we are recommending two pieces. One, that council approve the assignment for the remaining 30 or 40 days left on the existing contract, and also that the council waive the $375 assignment fee that would have been paid had this transition happened sooner in the contract. And I'm happy to respond to questions.
Council, are there questions? Mr. Rogers.
Just really quick, I don't have a problem with waiving the fee since the intention of it was to do the vetting. And clearly, we've already done our due diligence on that. I just wanted to know, will this impact service over the final 45 days at all? One, and two, are there any effects from the fire related to the contract and rates? Since I know that rates are typically determined based on the amount of homes that are being served and how many trucks are required, has there been any discussion about how that might impact the contract?
On the first piece, in terms of service, as a state requirement, the employees will be retained for the most part, so all of the drivers, et cetera, for the most part, will stay with Recology. So any change in service, and because we don't have new trucks yet, it will really be transparent to the public. But I'll let Mr. Sampler answer if there's any impact on the fire.
So the transfer won't go into effect immediately. There are other assignments that are also in the process of transitioning. At the completion of the last, we would execute on the asset purchase agreement, so it won't be the full 45 days between now and the end of the year and the start of the new contract. We are going to lose several days worth of routes with the loss of several homes in the community here, but that's going to be offset by a lot of drop box work. That's going to be debris cleanup. There is an enormous amount of cleanup already underway, and it's just going to get more with construction, demolition, road repairs. The list is long. So those hours that would otherwise go into collection would most likely be routed into drop box services.
Yeah, so my question kind of specifically to that point, a lot of the funding for that with the cleanup is going to be coming from a different source of money than from ratepayers.
Yes. Yes, so with the number of houses relative to the size of the community, I don't anticipate to directly address your question. There will not be an immediate rate impact.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, council? Do we have any cards on this? Okay, Ms. Combs, you have this item.
Resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa approving the assignment and assumption agreement and consent to assignment with North Bay Corporation and Recology Sonoma Marin, waiving the waiver of $375,000 assignment fee payable by North Bay Corporation under collection services contract, and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Council, your votes? And that passes unanimously. (14.3).
Yes, Mayor, before I read 14.3, I do want to say, I think, maybe he's not here, but I want to say, Rick Fell, I do want to acknowledge that in this disaster process, we've had to call on the Ratto Group to ask for some very unscheduled sweeping, and it had to be done with very specific guidelines in coordination with Republic, and could only be put at one part of the landfill, and they've been very, very responsive to us and continue to be as we continue to deal with the debris removal, the sweeping, and now the remnants of automobiles in the right-of-way. So I do want to acknowledge how responsive they have been to us, and particularly Rick Powell, and thank him publicly.
Thanks for being here, Mr. Powell.
Thank you. We're very happy to help, and we will continue to help any way we can as long as we're here.
Thank you.
Good evening.
14.3.
14.3 is report solid waste collection services agreement, discount program options. And so the last time we were before you with Recology in August of 2017, when you approved the agreement, you also asked us to come back to council with options on some kinds of discount programs. Currently, under the Ratto Group, they do offer a senior discount program. The eligibility is for single-family dwellings for individuals over the age of 65. Currently, there are over 6,000 households who are taking part in the discount program, and they offer it in all the cart sizes. If the council wanted to entertain a senior discount program, we would see it impacting the same number of households. Council could consider either a 10 or 20% discount. I do want to remind you that this would be funded through the franchise fees that the city will receive from the contract. Currently, the discount that is offered under the Ratto Group is about 20%. So the impact, if council offered a 10%, would be $238,000. If we offered a 20% impact, we would be paying $412 or refunding back out of our franchise fee on an annual basis. We also worked with Recology to look at a low-income discount program, which is something that they do in other jurisdictions that they serve. So currently, we don't have a low-income discount program. The proposal, though, would be to align the low-income discount program with what PG&E provides in their CARE program. So it's income-based, family size-based. It's offered to regardless of the cart size. Again, it would be single-family homes where people are responsible for their garbage bill, or and in the PG&E program, it's where they're responsible for their utility bill. So if we offered a low-income discount program, we estimate that almost 23,000 households could be eligible for this discount, and that's based on the number of households that are currently taking advantage of the PG&E CARE program. It would be eligible on all cart sizes. Again, we could look at a 10% discount rate or a 20% discount rate if council would like to consider this. The impact, again, is on the franchise fee, and those are funds that normally go into the general fund. If council looked at a 10%, you'd be talking about $439,000 reduction in the franchise fee, or a 20% is $877,000 reduction. Staff would recommend, if council would like to do a discount program, that you'd look at the low-income program. The low-income program would also include seniors who are low income and could benefit from the program, so it wouldn't exclude seniors, whereas the senior program could be available to people who don't really need it, but would also not be available to households who could probably benefit greatly. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Council, are there questions? Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. Could you indicate the savings that one might achieve in both the 10 and the 20% discounts, and get a sense of what the customers, how this would affect the customers?
So the new rate, the current rate, and I'll use the 32-gallon, which is basically the family size. The current rate is $17, $16.97. The new rate will be $27.05. If you did a 10% discount, the rate would be $24.34. If you did a 20% discount, the rate would be $21.64 a month.
Thank you.
Mr. Tibbetts.
Ms. Hurtado, what's the income threshold under the CARE program?
It is a sliding scale. So let's say for a family of four, a family of four with an income of less than $49,000 would qualify for the discount program under PG&E, and therefore would qualify here. Also, I will say there's the income base, but if any household is on public assistance, they automatically qualify for the PG&E CARE program.
Okay, thank you. And there was a 32-gallon can. What was one of the larger? I'm trying to equate what a family of four would likely use.
You could go from a 20-gallon to a 32 to a 64 to a 96, which would be huge.
Okay. Thank you. One other question I have, and I asked this early on in the process, and I'm not sure if I got an answer or not, but do we require mandatory service within the city?
A household cannot accumulate garbage, and so people could self-haul if they never accumulated on their property.
So we don't have mandatory service?
It's not mandatory, but the code does not allow you to accumulate any garbage.
Have we run any projections as to what that could do to increase savings if we generated more revenue through mandatory service? Because I'm thinking about it as, obviously we don't want garbage accumulating throughout the city or dumped in creeks, and that could be a symptom of not having a mandatory service program.
And Vice Mayor, no, we haven't run numbers, and at least in my experience with this over the last couple of years, we don't have, that isn't an issue for us in terms of large numbers not participating in the program.
Okay, thank you. I'd be curious in the future to maybe see what that would do for both our franchise fee and our ability to expand this more broadly, or just have more resources available to the city, because although I don't think we have a significant trash program in the city of Santa Rosa, I spent a lot of time growing up in West County, and there's a significant one out there, and it's trash that's coming from the city and other areas too, but that does get deposited out there.
Ms. Combs?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the presentation. I'm very excited that you brought us forward with a low-income discount program. I very much appreciate this element that was missing previously, that you've brought it back to us, so thanks. I'm just trying to sort out from the notes. Previously, how was eligibility determined? Was it only seniors previously?
Yes, with the Ratto group, it was seniors only. The person who had the bill in their name had to be 65 years old or older. And so all they needed to do was verify that, and they could mail that in.
Okay. Will we be increasing participation by doing this, or decreasing participation?
Substantially increased. So if you look at the senior program right now, you have about 6,000 households, and if we do a low income, it's about almost 23,000 households that would be eligible. So it's much larger.
It looks as if, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just, the research for this was interesting. The PG&E and staff were very helpful with partnering together. There were 22,700, I believe, eligible out of 81,000 in PG&E's customer count that fall in this service area. And the participation, I believe, is 18,800. So of the eligible, there's up to that, which is how we got to the 23% estimated participation.
Clearly a need, thank you. It looks as if, as I've read this, it's only for single-family residents. So is that because there's an assumption that renters are not paying, but the property owner is?
Usually in a multifamily, the garbage fee is not paid by the individual. There's not individualized bills, and that would be the reason.
Okay, and is that true for condominiums also?
Yeah.
Yes. Generally, there's a master account.
Okay. If there isn't, is there a way for an individual to apply?
Yes. If they're eligible for care, they'd be eligible for the discount.
Thank you very much.
I just want to do a math check on that, and I know it's always dangerous for me to do math in my head from up here, but on slide 4, 6,000 estimated customers is 14%, and on slide 6, 23,000 estimated customers is 23%.
Again,
we're talking about different holes?
Yes, you're talking about different pools of eligible participants. So it's 22.7.
So this is of eligible participants.
22.7 is the eligible. The participating is 18.8. 18.8 of 81,000 is 23%.
Okay.
The low income is a different population than the senior population. So we were pulling from Ratto's existing customer database relative to the customer base.
Okay, so this is, on slide 4, it's 14% of the senior population.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hurtado, could you remind us what the expected franchise fee was expected to be each year? I seem to remember 14, 15 million.
Oh, no.
No?
That would be nice. Councilman Rogers, so...
I'm just being optimistic.
Yes, very optimistic. So this year with the franchise and the additional contribution that Ratto makes, we're at about 5.2. Our projection for the 17-18 year with Recology is 6.7.
Exactly like I said.
You were on 14 because it's a 14% franchise fee.
Thank you. I do have to say, was a little bit surprised to see that 28% of our community is qualifying for care. That's not a good number and a very high number. So I do appreciate you bringing forward low income for sure. My interest in bringing forward and talking about the senior discount was actually more of a smoothing of the rate as well. So obviously we talked a lot when we approved this of the increase in whether it's a 20-gallon or a 32-gallon, it's either a 62 or a 63% increase for individuals. Factoring in the 18% discount that seniors were getting as well is a pretty substantial jump in 1 year. And so my interest is really in smoothing out that rate, particularly those who are on a fixed income. Do you have other communities that you work with that have both a low income rate and a senior discount rate?
No, we do not. The low income rate is what's used in the analysis that I did. Is a senior rate is not common in Recology's practice, so we went off of Rado's existing practice, and the closest thing we came up was this care participation program, or the care complement program.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Tibbetts.
Sorry, Mr. Hurtado, can you also verify what the income threshold is for a single family or single member household?
$32,480.
Any further questions, council? Do we have any cards on this? Mr. Sawyer, you have the item.
What I'd like to do is propose perhaps a compromise. I am concerned as we move into 2018 where our finances are going to be. And we have some major planning to do. And I think as we move closer to next year and we deal with the budget, it's going to get, we will find ourselves in some pretty difficult, with some pretty difficult decisions to make. So what I'm considering, I like the idea of the low income because I think it affects more people. I like the smoothing concept. It is a smoothing agent, if you will. It's more fair, I think. My dad is a senior. Well, I'm a senior, and I don't. I might be able to, because of my age, get a senior discount, but I don't need a discount. And I think that doing it for low income makes a lot of sense, and people could well need that break. And even though it's only a small amount to each family, and this is where my concern comes in, it does add up in the cumulative. And so I was wondering if the council would consider 15% in low income as opposed to the 20. What I'm worried about is next year we say 20%, and then all of a sudden we have to go to our, put this back before us and withdraw our offer of 20% because we simply can't afford the reduction in our franchise. So in our franchise fee, and it is a small amount, but it does add up. And these amounts that we consider small today, in the next year, we may not consider all that small. So I would, as a compromise, I was moving down the 10% trail, but in looking at the possibilities that maybe a 15% would be a kind of a fair compromise. So I'm wondering if there's any support on the council for a compromise position.
I'd second that.
So, if I may, previously it was 18. So I'm just wondering if you would consider doing what we had, which was 18.
Well, I'd like to keep it at, I would like to keep it at 15. I mean, 18 is closer to 20, might as well go with the 20. I know that it's only 5%, but I think we will be looking at 5% a lot differently next year than we look at it tonight. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. I know it's conservative, but I'm thinking of this conservatively because I think we're going to be hit with some pretty dire times financially in the months to come.
And Mayor, just so you have all the information, a 15% discount would be $658,000 a year out of our franchise fee.
Yeah, it's a significant hike in the hit to the general fund. even though it's less as a percentage.
If I may, can you also give us what the figure would be for the 32-gallon? You had given us some figures, I think 21.
Yes, for the 32-gallon, it would be $22.99.
So, point of clarification, council member, were you saying 15% for just the low income, or were you looking at 15% in both categories?
Well, I'm suggesting we only provide a low-income discount at 15%. And so what I'll do is I'm gonna make a motion, since I have this item. Let's make sure I have the right one. I'll introduce a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa approving a low-income rate discount program under the Solid Waste Collection Services Agreement between the City of Santa Rosa and Recology Incorporated, utilizing collection services franchise fees to fund the program and waive further reading.
Second.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
You made the motion with the resolution as written. Did you?
Oh, it doesn't say.
You intended to.
It didn't say 15%.
Right. So down in the first.
Here we go.
Result paragraph.
With the change, or with the resolution indicating a 15% discount, and then waive further reading.
Second.
Thank you.
Mr. Rogers.
I'm certainly happy to go with the low-income discount. I did want to just reiterate the concern that what this means is for seniors, it is an 80% increase for them 1 year to 1 year. And that's what my concern was and why I was looking for a way to smooth that out.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Tibbetts? No? Your votes, please. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Do we have any further cards, Ms. Gomez? We do have two written communications that are in your packet and public comments. David Harris.
Good evening, council members. We're coming to the end here, thankfully. Mayor Corsi, members of the council. David Harris, I live at 355 Gemma Circle, and fortunately we're back after evacuation. 2 cats, a daughter, an 86-year-old father-in-law, and my wife and I. And, it's kind of a new world. But I just want to say I'm confused as to why we're having so much trouble finding some way forward with some of these homeless issues. I'll just leave it at that. It just seems that we go around in circles, and I am confused. But I do want to comment on some things related to fire. I think there's a lot of data here to understand as to just how this fire advanced. I think the theories about the wildland fire, you look up at the ridge there at Foothill Ranch, and yes, it was a wildland forest fire that burned the houses. But by the time it got to the west side, it looks to me like the houses were burning the trees, not the other way around. And that is not kind of in the general understanding of where the fire risk is. I mean, it is very clear that we have a high fire risk construction standard, which we need to look seriously at. And I don't know, maybe are the universities, the insurance companies, anybody doing research? I would ask that you ask your staff to find out who is, because, there's not going to be much evidence left here in not much time. And hopefully there's enough collected data and people are thinking about this in terms of what we can learn from this disaster. I certainly, I think we need to really look seriously at how much we rebuild out of the standard old stick-built construction. I think, some penetration of non-flammables would have had a significant effect, but we had 100% of tinder boxes, almost 100%. We had a few with, eaves and vents and stuff like that allowed them to escape, but they were rare cases. that, you know, and people did not realize how risky this construction is and how much styrofoam has gone into the new construction. You go up to Fountain Grove and all that styrofoam, you know, we didn't think it was a risk. We have got things going on that should not go on in the rebuild. So I would ask that the city also play a role in reviewing research, seeing that something's being done. I mean, if nobody's doing anything and we don't have any money, I don't know what you're going to do, but I think somebody should be trying to find out who is using it, trying to get some better understanding, and I think Cal should be in there. Let me just add that I would like to see a demonstration of fire-resistant construction alternatives. And finally, on kind of the homeless issue, unfortunately, the old hospital is being vandalized to the point where it couldn't be used for anything. And can FEMA help us with that?
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Council, I'd like to adjourn tonight in memory of Greg Milnarchik, who was a Santa Rosa dentist, a patron of the arts, a advocate for people with disabilities, and a husband and a father and a friend. Rest in peace, Greg. We'll miss you.
Santa Rosa, out there in the middle of everything.
But how the annexation improved my life?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Another great benefit of the annexation of Roseland is infrastructure repair and replacement. This means roads, storm drains, sewers, and more will become the city's responsibility and will be upgraded to city standards.